The lake cabin had been in my family since the 1960s, a hand-built retreat of cedar, stone, and memories perched along the still waters of Lake Halcyon. It was the kind of place where time slowed, where loons called at dusk, and mornings began, with mist rising off the lake like steam from an old dream. My wife, Adriana, had never really had the chance to enjoy it, at least not until recently. As a high-ranking officer in the State Police Tactical Division, her schedule was a chessboard of crisis response and command briefings. But after wrapping up a grueling 6-month narcotic sting, she finally took leave. Her plan: 3 days of silence, coffee on the porch, and swimming with our shepherd mix. Ranger Dotted should have been perfect. What she didn't count on was Carol Ashford, head of the Lakeside Grove Homeowners Association. Around here they didn't call her Carol, they called her HOA Karen. And Karen had a gift, not for hospitality or neighborly warmth, but for weaponizing bylaws like a general with a private army of clipboard soldiers. Lakeside Grove was the kind of place where the grass was always cut to regulation height and every mailbox matched. They had rules for curtain colors, rules for wind chimes, even rules for the direction your Adirondack chairs could face. Our cabin sat on the edge of it, all technically outside the HOA's boundary lines, but close enough to make Karen twitch. The trouble started on a Friday morning. Adriana had arrived late the night before and was sipping coffee on the porch when a golf cart screeched to a stop at the base of our gravel driveway. Out stepped Karen, crisp polo tucked into khakis, clipboard clutched like a holy relic. "You must be ... visiting," she said, her eyes darting between Adriana, the dog, and the still smoking grill. "I'm Carol Ashford, HOA president." Adriana rose slowly, ever calm, ever composed. "I'm Adriana Vale. This is our cabin. My husband and I own it." Karen blinked, briefly thrown. "Oh well, you're not listed on the community registry." "That's because we're not in the HOA." Karen forced a tight smile. "Your cabin borders Lakeside Grove. It's within visible proximity of regulated properties. That makes you functionally part of the community." Adriana raised an eyebrow. "Is that in your bylaws?" "It's implied. Then it's imaginary." The temperature dropped a few degrees. Karen stiffened. "You're required to submit a pet permit for that dog. Also, grilling past 9 p.m. violates our noise ordinance." "We own this land outright," Adriana replied. "No HOA agreement, no covenant signatures. You have no jurisdiction here." Karen's smile vanished. "If you're not going to cooperate, I may have to file a report." "For what?" Adriana asked. "Sitting on my own porch with a cup of coffee and a well-behaved dog." Karen glanced at the house, as if willing some code violation to manifest. "The cabin doesn't match architectural standards, and the deck lighting is excessive. It disrupts the lake's natural character." Adriana stepped down the porch stairs and closed the gap between them. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't posture. She just looked Karen square in the eyes and said, "You're going to want to walk away now." Karen sputtered, turning a shade of crimson usually reserved for crime scenes and bad wine. "You're making a serious mistake, then, right? It up," Adriana said, "and watch it get shredded in court." Karen didn't respond. She climbed back into her golf cart, revved the tiny engine like it was a Harley, and sped off down the road, her visor bouncing with every bump. Later that day, Adriana called me, her voice level but tight. "You won't believe what just happened." I did, though I knew Karen by reputation. She had ousted an elderly couple from their home for planting an unapproved maple tree, filed a noise complaint on a child's birthday party. She thrived on contraland. Adriana had just told her no. I told her to hang tight. I'd be up the next morning. We'd enjoy our weekend. Let it blow over. But Karen wasn't the type to let things blow over. She was the type to escalate, and neither of us had any idea just how far she was willing to go. I arrived at the cabin the next morning expecting to find Adriana relaxed, maybe reading on the dock. Instead, I found 2 county patrol cars parked at the edge of our property, their lights off but their presence unmistakable. A third vehicle, a matte black golf cart, was already familiar. Karen was back. She stood near the porch with her arms crossed, sunglasses perched on her nose like twin shields. One deputy scribbled something in a notepad. The other stood stiffly, as if unsure whose side he was supposed to be on. Adriana remained on the porch steps, composed but tense. Ranger sat at her side, ears alert. The second I stepped out of my truck, Karen pointed like a prosecutor addressing a jury. "That's him. The property's listed under his name, and he hasn't registered with the HOA either." The taller deputy turned to me. "Sir, we received a formal complaint about trespassing and unauthorized occupancy of an HOA dwelling." I blinked. "We own this cabin. It's not regulated by any HOA that's been established for decades." Karen scoffed. "The area has changed. The HOA has expanded. You're within the visual perimeter now, which gives us discretionary authority." Adriana rose, her tone even but cutting. "There is no such legal concept as a visual perimeter clause. We're not in your subdivision, Karen. You don't get to redraw boundaries with a ruler and some tape." Karen's face flushed. "You're impersonating a legal authority. I want her removed for obstruction." That was it. Adriana reached into a duffel, pulled out her ID wallet, and flipped it open with practiced precision. The gold badge glinted. In the morning sun. Lieutenant Commander Adriana Vale, she said calmly. State Police Tactical Division, Serial and Pat Sampe Tujiribu Lapanata Sapula. You just called law enforcement to remove a sworn officer from her own private property. The silence was sudden, like nature itself had taken a breath. The shorter deputy stepped forward cautiously. Ma'am, we weren't informed you were law enforcement. You shouldn't need to be, Adriana replied. Your dispatcher had our address. A simple lookup would have shown ownership records and confirmed we're outside HOA jurisdiction. Karen tried to salvage control. That doesn't change the fact that this cabin is visible from HOA managed lots. The bylaws, your bylaws don't apply here, Adriana snapped, her voice rising for the first time. Not to me. Not to this land. And not to my dog, who is service certified under federal ADA statutes. Karen opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The deputies exchanged a look. The taller one cleared his throat. Given the property records and Commander Vale's credentials, there's no legal reason to proceed further. We're standing down. And I suggest, Adriana added, leveling her gaze at Karen, that you do the same. Karen turned on her heel without another word and stormed to her golf cart, kicking gravel as she revved away. The deputies apologized before leaving. One even muttered something about this HOA being a nightmare. Back inside the cabin, Adriana set down her badge and exhaled slowly. She tried to have me evicted. With law enforcement? On fabricated charges. She didn't know who she was dealing with, I said, pouring her a glass of water. She doesn't care, Adriana replied. People like her never do. Power is power. Facts are inconvenient. I'd seen Adriana command tactical raids, coordinate cross-jurisdictional sting operations, and walk into cartel hideouts without blinking. But the look in her eyes now was different. This wasn't about job titles or legal boundaries anymore. Karen had tried to use the system to humiliate her to remove her from her own land, using lies and intimidation. That wasn't something Adriana could just brush off. She wants a war, she said quietly. She just declared it on the wrong person. I nodded slowly. So, what now? She picked up her phone. Now I do what I do best. I build a case. Her fingers began tapping, rapidly searching county ordinances, HOA and corporation documents, and property records. She'd already slipped into mission mode. I watched her from across the room, equal parts proud and furious. This wasn't just a weekend getaway anymore. It had just become a battleground. Karen didn't back off. If anything, the failed police stunt only fueled her obsession. By Monday, 3 separate violation notices were nailed to the edge of our fence. One cited our dog for visible disturbance. Another demanded we restore visual harmony by removing non-standard cabin finishes. The third simply read, "Cease unauthorized occupation, final notice." We laughed at first until the water shut off. A call to the county confirmed what we suspected. A routine inspection had triggered a service disruption. No further details were available. Just bureaucratic dead ends and vague forms. Adriana didn't laugh then. 2 days later, animal control showed up. Someone had reported Ranger as a dangerous stray. The officer was polite but confused when he saw our perfectly calm, vest-wearing shepherd lying on the deck like a sleepy teddy bear. The final straw came Thursday morning. We woke to find a bright orange tow warning sticker slapped across our pickup truck windshield, warning it would be removed for violating community street parking ordinances. We didn't even have a street, just our own gravel driveway. She's escalating, Adriana said, staring out at the lake. Testing how far she can push until we break or leave. But Adriana didn't break. She built. By now she had files on her laptop organized by categories: legal overreach, false reporting, property line encroachments, and abuse of authority. She tracked down former HOA board members, some who had quietly resigned after Karen took charge, citing philosophical disagreements that sounded suspiciously like forced removals. One had even recorded audio from the last meeting. She attended. Karen, if they think owning land means they're untouchable, I'll teach them otherwise. Every square inch that touches HOA land is fair game. You just have to know how to twist the screws. Adriana's eyes narrowed when she heard it. We reached out to a land surveyor. The cabin was 72 feet outside the official HOA boundary. No overlap, no easements, no technicalities, nothing. That same day, Adriana filed 2 complaints, one with the county zoning board, the other with the state attorney general's office. The first challenged the legality of Karen's visual perimeter enforcement tactics. The second documented a pattern of coordinated harassment, misuse of enforcement authority, and false police reports. You think they'll take it seriously? I asked. Adriana turned her laptop toward me, showing a signed affidavit from a former board secretary, along with a 2-minute audio clip of Karen instructing members on how to create enough discomfort that outsiders choose to move. They will now, she said. That weekend, it exploded. The local news caught wind of the story. State police officer allegedly targeted by rogue HOA. A field reporter came to our cabin and filmed Adriana walking the property, pointing out markers, notices, and explaining how an HOA president tried to rewrite the law through intimidation and petty retaliation. By Monday, a formal state investigation had begun. Karen responded with a neighborhood newsletter so passive-aggressive it might as well have been handwritten in lipstick. Those who attract media attention invite scrutiny. But Lakeside Grove stands proud as a model community for those who play by the rules. May we all remember that harmony begins with cooperation. But harmony, in this case, was Karen speak for compliance. And she had run out of people willing to comply. One by one, residents started speaking out. A retired teacher recounted how Karen fined her for planting hydrangeas without prior approval. A widower shared footage of Karen trespassing into his backyard to measure deck width. A single mother had received threats of foreclosure for painting her shutters the wrong shade of navy. Adriana compiled everything. Anonymized statements, photos, HOA meeting transcripts, a complete timeline of events. She uploaded it all to a secure portal and shared it with investigators. Then she waited, and so did Karen, unaware that her next HOA meeting would be her last. It happened on a Tuesday. Clear skies, sun dancing across Lake Halcyon's gentle ripples, and birdsong drifting through pine boughs as if nature itself had been holding its breath. The HOA board meeting began as usual in the Lakeside Grove community center, a beige rectangle of polished floors and brittle smiles. Karen sat at the head table, gavel in hand, flanked by the last two loyal board members she hadn't yet driven off. She wore her signature navy blazer and that same thin-lipped smirk and expression that said she was untouchable. She had no idea what was coming. The first sign something was off came when Doug Hastings, a soft-spoken veteran who'd lived in the neighborhood for 15 years, stood up and handed Karen a sealed envelope. She opened it, scanned the letter inside, and stiffened. Then came the second blow, 3 plainclothes agents stepping into the room, flashing badges from the state attorney general's office. Carol Ashford, one of them, said calmly, "We're here pursuant to an active investigation into abuse of administrative authority, intentional misrepresentation of jurisdiction, and harassment of property owners beyond HOA boundaries." Karen stood up, her face frozen. "This is a misunderstanding. I have every right to enforce, you do not," the agent cut in. "We have documented testimony from residents, audio recordings, and falsified police complaints that were traced directly back to your office." Gasps rippled through the audience. Doug stood again. "I move that the board vote to remove Carol Ashford as president, effective immediately." No one objected. The gavel she loved so much was quietly collected by a board member, and just like that, Karen's reign ended not with a bang, but a stunned silence. Back at the cabin, Adriana and I watched it all unfold on a live stream provided by a local reporter. When Karen was escorted out of the building, Adriana didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She just leaned back in the chair on our porch and whispered, "That's how you take down a tyrant." Over the next few days, a quiet shift rippled across Lakeside Grove. The new acting board, led by Doug, began rolling back dozens of Karen's absurd bylaws. Residents who'd once whispered their frustrations were suddenly free to speak openly. A town hall was scheduled, not a board meeting, but a real discussion where neighbors could finally shape the kind of community they wanted to live in. Adriana was invited, officially, as a guest of honor, but she politely declined. Her mission was complete. Instead, we stayed at the cabin that weekend, sat by the water, let Ranger roam free without anyone measuring leash length or growling about permits. The land felt like it belonged to us again, not just by law, but in spirit. That night, Adriana handed me a folder. Inside were copies of everything she'd collected: statements, reports, the entire case file. "Keep it," she said. "If someone ever tries to pull something like this again, you'll be ready." I looked up at her. "You could have walked away, could have let her embarrass herself." She nodded. "But then she would have done it to the next person, and the next." A soft breeze rolled in from the lake, stirring the trees. For the first time in weeks, there was no tension in Adriana's shoulders, no tightness in her jaw. She looked, still, peaceful. That's when headlights appeared at the edge of the property. A car rolled up, an unfamiliar SUV. Out stepped a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a hesitant wave. She introduced herself as Claire Mendel, a neighbor from the far side of the lake. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, voice cracking. "Karen fined me $500 for letting my grandkids draw with sidewalk chalk. We couldn't afford groceries that month. What you did, it helped people like us." Adriana stood, walked over and hugged her. No titles, no authority, just two neighbors, both finally free of the same shadow. As Claire drove off, Adriana turned to me. "You know what's funny?" She said. "What?" "She tried to evict me using the cops, and in the end it was the law that evicted her." I laughed, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. On the shore of Lake Halcyon, balance had been restored, not just in property lines or power structures, but in something deeper, justice, and we weren't going anywhere.